Every single day, you perform a series of highly coordinated, almost subconscious movements without giving them a single thought. You pull out your smartphone, tap a glass screen, write an email on your laptop, or type out a quick message to a friend. Your fingers fly across the keys in a blur of muscle memory, moving from one letter to another with incredible speed. But if you actually stop and look down at the keyboard in front of you, you will notice something incredibly bizarre. The letters are not arranged in alphabetical order. They are not organized by how frequently they are used, nor are they set up in a way that makes any logical sense to a beginner. Instead, we are greeted by a chaotic, seemingly random sequence starting at the top left corner. Q, W, E, R, T, Y. It is an arrangement that has frustrated countless people learning to type, yet it has remained absolutely unchanged for over a century and a half. Why on earth did we settle on this inconvenient layout? And why has the entire world agreed to keep using a system that seems intentionally designed to slow us down? To truly understand this daily mystery, we have to travel back in time to the middle of the 19th century, to a world that was rapidly industrializing but still communicated at the speed of a handwritten letter. Back then, if you wanted to send a message, keep a business ledger, or write a book, you had to do it by dipping a metal or quill pen into a bottle of ink and dragging it across paper. Clerks suffered from chronic hand cramps, and professional writers were bottlenecked by the physical limitations of the human hand. The Industrial Revolution had successfully mechanized transportation with steam engines and revolutionized communication with the telegraph, but the office workspace was still stuck in the dark ages. Inventors all over the world realized that whoever could build a machine to print letters faster than a human could write them would not only make a fortune, but would also reshape global commerce forever. Dozens of brilliant minds tried and failed to build a practical writing machine, but the breakthrough finally happened in a smoky, cluttered machine shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1867. An inventor, printer, and newspaper editor named Christopher Latham Sholes, along with his partners Carlos Glidden and Samuel Soule, set out to construct what they called a literary piano. Their early prototypes looked exactly like a musical instrument, featuring a row of black and white keys arranged in a simple, straightforward alphabetical sequence. Sholes believed that because everyone already knew the alphabet, an ABCD layout would be the most intuitive and fastest way to type. Initially, the machine worked brilliantly, but as soon as they put the prototype into the hands of professional stenographers and telegraph operators, a major mechanical disaster emerged. The physical anatomy of these early typewriters relied on a series of long metal rods called type bars that swung upward from a circular basket to strike a piece of paper whenever a key was pressed. When a typist got into a rhythm and began typing with any decent amount of speed, keys that were close to each other in the alphabet would be pressed in rapid succession. The metal rods would fly up at the exact same moment, collide midair, and lock up into a tangled, useless metal knot. This constant clashing was a massive engineering bottleneck. Every time the keys jammed, the typist had to physically reach into the ink-covered machine, pull the metal rods apart, wipe their hands, and start all over again. Sholes quickly realized that his alphabetical keyboard was actually too intuitive for its own good. It allowed people to type certain letter combinations so quickly that the physical machine simply could not keep up. This is where the famous historical legend of the QWERTY keyboard was born, suggesting that Sholes intentionally designed the layout to be as confusing and inefficient as possible, deliberately slowing down human typists so the machine wouldn't jam. While that makes for a great story, the reality is far more brilliant and scientifically calculated. Sholes did not want to slow people down. He wanted to separate the letters that frequently appeared next to each other in the English language. By studying the patterns of English vocabulary, Sholes identified the most common letter combinations known as digraphs, such as T and H, E and R, and I and N. He realized that if these frequently paired letters were placed on keys next to each other, their corresponding metal rods in the typewriter basket would be physically adjacent, making a mid-air collision almost guaranteed. To solve this, Sholes began a meticulous game of trial and error, moving these common pairs to opposite sides of the keyboard layout. By separating the keys physically, He ensured that when a typist typed a word like the or there, the metal rods would rise from completely different angles of the basket, giving one rod enough time to fall back down before the next one flew up to strike. In other words, QWERTY was a brilliant mechanical hack designed to make typing overall much faster by eliminating the downtime caused by constant mechanical jams. Interestingly, there was another massive influence on the shape of the QWERTY keyboard that had nothing to do with typewriter mechanics and everything to do with the early adopters of the technology. The primary customers for Sholes' invention were telegraph operators who needed to rapidly transcribe incoming Morse code messages. As these operators listened to the clicks and buzzes of the telegraph, they had to type the letters in real time. If the keyboard layout was confusing or made it difficult to resolve ambiguous sounds quickly, the operators would fall behind. Sholes and his team worked closely with these early power users, making subtle adjustments to the keyboard layout based on their feedback. For example, some historians point out that the letters S and Z were placed near each other because, in Morse code, they can easily be confused, and having them close together allowed the operators to quickly make corrections. Through this combination of mechanical problem solving and user feedback, the first official QWERTY layout was finalized and patented. By 1873, after years of struggle, Christopher Sholes was exhausted, running out of money, and frustrated by the difficulty of manufacturing his machine at a massive scale. He decided to sell his patent rights to E. Remington and Sons, a legendary manufacturing company based in New York. Remington was famous for producing high-quality firearms, but with the American Civil War over, their gun sales had plummeted, and they were looking to repurpose their precision manufacturing lines to make sewing machines and agricultural tools. Remington saw the massive potential in the typewriter and used their engineers to polish Sholes' design. They made a few final, subtle tweaks to the keyboard layout, including moving the letter R to the top row, which, according to a popular theory of the time, allowed salesmen to quickly type the brand name typewriter, using only the keys on the top row during product demonstrations. With Remington's massive production capabilities, the typewriter number 2 was launched, and it became an absolute commercial juggernaut. However, QWERTY's journey to absolute global dominance was still not guaranteed, as there were many rival manufacturers producing alternative keyboard layouts that claimed to be much more logical and easier to learn. The moment that sealed QWERTY's fate came in 1888, during a highly publicized typing contest held in Cincinnati, Ohio. A court stenographer from Salt Lake City named Frank Edward McGurran had spent years memorizing the QWERTY layout, allowing him to type without looking at his hands, a revolutionary technique he pioneered called touch typing. He went head-to-head in a speed trial against Louis Taube, a highly skilled typist who used a rival keyboard layout with a different key arrangement. McGurran completely dominated the competition, typing at a blistering speed that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that a memorized QWERTY layout was incredibly fast and efficient. The news of McGurran's victory spread like wildfire, and businesses realized that if they wanted maximum productivity, they needed to train their typists using the QWERTY system. This triggered a powerful economic phenomenon known as path dependency, or the lock-in effect. Schools began offering typing courses exclusively on QWERTY keyboards, and offices purchased QWERTY machines because that was the only layout their newly hired secretaries knew how to use. On the flip side, typists refused to learn any other layout because QWERTY was the only system that guaranteed them a job. A massive self-reinforcing loop was established, and by the turn of the 20th century, QWERTY had successfully locked out all competitors, becoming the undisputed global standard for written communication. Over the next few decades, as typing became a universal skill, researchers began to question whether sticking with a design born from 19th century mechanical limitations actually made sense. In 1936, a university professor named Dr. August Dvorak introduced the Dvorak Simplified Keyboard, a layout engineered using scientific principles of ergonomics and letter frequency. Dvorak placed all of the most commonly used vowels and consonants on the home row, the middle row where your fingers naturally rest when you type. In a standard QWERTY layout, you only type about 30% of your words on the home row, forcing your fingers to constantly stretch and jump to the top and bottom rows. On Dvorak, over 70% of typing happens on the home row, which drastically reduces finger movement, increases typing speed by up to 20%, and significantly reduces physical fatigue. Despite being demonstrably superior in every scientific metric, the Dvorak keyboard failed to gain any traction. The cost of retraining millions of typists, replacing millions of existing typewriters, and rewriting educational curricula was simply too high. Even during World War II, when the United States Navy conducted tests showing that Dvorak typists were significantly faster and suffered fewer errors, the government ultimately decided against transitioning because the temporary disruption to the war effort would have been too costly. QWERTY was simply too big to fail. It was a classic example of good enough defeating perfect, simply because it got to the market first and established a monopoly on human habit. The ultimate test of QWERTY's endurance came with the digital revolution of the late 20th century. As heavy cast iron typewriters were replaced by electronic word processors and personal computers, the physical constraints that had birthed QWERTY completely disappeared. There were no longer any metal rods to clash, no mechanical baskets to jam, and no physical reasons to keep the letters separated. Theoretically, computer manufacturers could have easily shipped their systems with any keyboard layout they wanted. Yet they didn't dare to change a single letter. To do so would have alienated their entire customer base, who had spent decades developing deep muscle memory on the old system. The physical limitations of the machine had vanished, but the mental habits of the human species remained ironclad. Today, we have carried this 19th century mechanical compromise into the most futuristic spaces imaginable. When you pull out a cutting-edge smartphone, you are looking at a sleek virtual keyboard rendered on a sheet of chemically strengthened glass. The phone uses complex artificial intelligence, predictive text algorithms, and haptic vibration engines to guess what you are trying to say, yet the visual layout on that screen is still identical to the one Christopher Sholes hammered together in a dusty Wisconsin workshop in 1868. We have changed the medium from ink and iron to pixels and light, but we are still bound by the ghost of a typewriter that jammed when people typed too fast. Looking back, the story of the QWERTY keyboard is not just a fascinating piece of history. It is a profound lesson in how human civilization actually evolves. It serves as a reminder that the technologies we use every day are rarely the result of perfect planning or ultimate efficiency. Instead, they are often shaped by historical accidents, temporary fixes, and the unstoppable power of human habit. We didn't choose the most logical path, but we adapted to the chaotic one so beautifully that it became an inseparable part of who we are. So, the next time you look down at your keyboard and type out a quick message, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey of those 26 letters, a timeless bridge of muscle memory connecting our digital future to a forgotten mechanical past.